think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. Peace be upon you, O son of the messenger of God. Peace be upon you, O son of the master of the successors. We bear witness that you are the trustee of God and the son of his trustee. You lived a blessed life, departed praiseworthy, and died a martyr, deprived and wronged. And we bear witness that God will fulfill what he promised you, and will destroy those who abandoned you, and punish those who killed you. And we bear witness that you fulfilled the covenant of God, and strove in his way until certainty came to you. So may God's mercy be away from those who killed you and wronged you. And may God's mercy be away from the people that heard of this and were pleased with it. O God, we make you our witness that we are friends to those who befriend you, and enemies to those who are hostile toward you. May our fathers and our mothers be sacrificed for you, O son of the messenger of God. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So this is the 14th in our series of sessions for the nights of Ashura, and now continuing in these blessed nights of Arbaeen on the subject of Tabyeen or clarification. This is the fourth and penultimate part of the second series on Tabyeen. We will be continuing this series during these remaining nights of Arbaeen, God willing. As with all of our other sessions, such as those on patience, the lantern of the path, and the art of supplication, it is strongly recommended that anyone consuming this, at the very least, review the previous sessions prior to consuming this one. This is because of the nature of the discussion, the manner of discourse really requires that each part build upon the one that came before. And so as to avoid confusion, misunderstanding, or in fact any invalid assumptions that might lead to what is the antithesis of Tabyeen, it is strongly recommended that people review the previous parts. While we do have a recap for each session, the recap is highly summarized. And in order to get the full nuance, the previous sessions will really need to be consumed, studied, and reflected upon. Also, some of these sessions are rather long. So I ask everyone to have the patience and fortitude to be able to go through them fully, because all of it is quite important. Nevertheless, if I can get a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, we can move on to the recap of our previous session.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل الفرج.
So in our 13th session, we turned our gaze to the front lines of the Ummah, the youth. No longer a distant demographic or a sentimental concern, the youth were revealed as the battleground of our time, assaulted by ideological confusion, targeted by algorithmic seduction, and left vulnerable by a silence too long maintained by the elders. Drawing from the Quran, the sayings of Ahl al-Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them, and the teachings of Imam Khamenei, especially his Letter for You campaign and his warnings on the soft war, we explored the divine station of youth in history and their central role to the jihad of Tabyeen. The companions of the cave, Prophet Ibrahim, Prophet Yusuf, Sayyedah Maryam, all are exemplars of youthful sincerity in the face of empire and temptation. We diagnose the modern crisis, not merely of disbelief, but rather of disinterest. Not a rebellion against the faith, but a numbing of the desire to even seek it. And so the call was made to rekindle longing before demanding knowledge, to soften hearts before instructing minds. We then outlined the enemy's methods: identity fragmentation, overstimulation, moral inversion, and spiritual despair. And in response, we offered a strategy grounded in the guidance of the Quran and Ahl al-Bayt to revive the identity of Wilayah, to restore reverence and silence, to rebuild broken trust in families, to cultivate companionship-based mentorship, to embed sincerity in every gathering, and to prepare the youth for the jihad of clarification, not only by protecting them, but by empowering them as torchbearers of truth. From Karbala to Qom, from Qasim to Hujjaji, from Ali al-Akbar to the seminarian poets of the revolution, the path was clear. Youth are not ornaments of the Ummah. They are its heartbeat. But the question remains, what happens when those who walked the path before, the mothers of Karbala, the women of resistance, become the teachers of clarity? When the voice that rose in Kufa, shackled but unshaken, becomes the standard of truth in an age of compromise. That is the mission of this session. We will now follow the footsteps of Sayyedah Zaynab. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the main part.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So, in every age, tyrants believe that by spilling blood, they can silence a movement. They believe that by killing the leader, the mission dies. But Karbala proved otherwise. For the revolution of Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, did not end with his martyrdom. It began anew in the voice of his sister. Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, did not rise to claim authority. She rose because no voice remained except hers. She stood in the court of Yazid, not as a prisoner, but as a clarifier of divine truth. Her sermon did not merely describe tragedy, it shattered the narrative of the oppressors. It exposed the false claims of victory and preserved the moral clarity of Ashura for generations to come. In Quran, Surah Al-Qasas, the chapter of the narratives, 28th chapter of the Quran, verse number 5, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "And we desire to show favor to those who are oppressed in the land, and to make them leaders and to make them inheritors." Her chains, Sayyedah Zaynab's chains were not symbols of defeat. Rather, they were a refutation of worldly power. Her hijab was not an obstacle to resistance, but the very banner of her dignity and defiance. She stood veiled, yet unveiled the truths Yazid sought to bury. She stood shackled, yet unshackled the conscience of the Ummah. Her sermon in Damascus echoes to this day. So plot your schemes, and exert your efforts, and strive with all of your power. By God, you will never erase our remembrance, nor extinguish our revelation, nor reach our end, nor wash away your shame. And like with all of these different sessions, the write-up contains all of the citations, references, and more, and I recommend everyone please take a look at that. So her words were not those of a victim, but of a witness to divine justice, a woman who had seen slaughter and captivity and still refused to submit to the throne of falsehood. This moment must be understood, not just as an act of grief, but as an act of divine clarification, an act of Tabyeen. Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, embodied the truth in blood. Sayyedah Zaynab articulated it in speech. Without her, the revolution of Ashura could have been drowned by propaganda and forgotten by fear. With her, it became an eternal beacon for the oppressed. In Quran, Surah al-Fussilat, the chapter of the expounded signs, 41st chapter of the Quran, verse number 33, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And who speaks better than one who calls to God and acts righteously and says, 'Indeed, I am of the Muslims, of those who submit.'" Her role must also be seen in harmony with the role of Imam Ali ibn al-Husayn Zayn al-Abidin, peace and blessings be upon them both, the Imam of her time. Sayyedah Zaynab did not rise out of rebellion, nor out of personal ambition. She acted in coordination with the Imam and with his permission, and always deferred to his spiritual authority. Her leadership was not independent of Imamah, it was the clarifying extension of it. Imam Khamenei, in a speech on Sayyedah Zaynab, has said, "Sayyedah Zaynab was the tongue of Imam Husayn, and Imam Sajjad was the silent proof. Together they preserved the Wilayah of God in a world that wished to bury it." And again, all of the references, citations can be found in the write-up. In her courage, we find not rebellion, but submission. In her speech, not chaos, but order. In her stance, not defiance of religion, but its highest defense. She did not become the voice of Ashura because she was a woman, nor did she become the voice of Ashura despite being a woman. She became it because she was prepared, because she believed, and because she spoke only when the silence of others threatened the truth. Sayyedah Zaynab is the mother of Tabyeen, and we, who claim to love Imam al-Husayn, must walk in her footsteps. Please give me a salawat and we start looking at women in the Quran, agents of revelation and resistance.
اللهم صل
اللهم صل
على
على
محمد
محمد وآل
وآل
محمد.
محمد وعجل فرجه.
So our focus now shifts to reframing the narrative surrounding women in Islamic revelation, moving beyond the perception of women as mere symbolic accessories to male leadership, and instead highlighting their role as active participants in tabyeen or clarification, in resistance, and in the transmission of divine message. We will demonstrate that the Quran itself affirms the spiritual and political agency of women, not as a product of modern reinterpretation, but as a truth rooted in the very text of revelation. By tracing a Quranic lineage of women who clarified divine truths through obedience, confrontation, narration, and sacrifice, this exploration ultimately culminates in the enduring legacy of Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, whose life stands as a testament to the profound agency and authority granted to women within the Islamic tradition. So firstly, let us look at the mother of Musa, or the mother of Moses, revelation in the hands of a woman. The Quran begins the story of Prophet Musa, Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, not with miracles, but with a woman. And not just any woman, but the one who received direct divine revelation. In Quran, in Surah Al-Qasas, the chapter of the narratives, 28th chapter of the Quran, verse number 7, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, "We revealed to the mother of Moses, nurse him, then when you fear for him, cast him into the river, and do not fear nor grieve. Indeed, we shall restore him to you and make him one of the messengers." This was wahi, or revelation, not legislative, but revelatory nevertheless. In the most vulnerable moment of her life, God trusted her with a command that would shape prophetic history. She did not argue, she obeyed, and her obedience was itself an act of tabyeen. A woman confronting tyranny not with sword or speech, but with the trust that exposed Pharaoh's fear and laid the groundwork for the mission of Prophet Musa. Next, let us look at Sayyedah Asiyah, the believer in the palace of oppression. The Quran introduces Sayyedah Asiyah, the wife of Pharaoh, not merely as a compassionate woman, but as a paragon of resistance within the heart of tyranny. In Quran, in Surah Al-Qasas, again, the chapter of the narratives, 28th chapter of the Quran, verse number 9, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, "The wife of Pharaoh said, 'He will be a comfort to my eyes and to yours. Do not kill him. Maybe he will benefit us, or we may adopt him as a son.' Yet they did not perceive what was to come." And indeed, she is immortalized as a model believer in Surah Al-Tahrim, the chapter of the prohibition, 66th chapter of the Quran, verse number 11, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "God has drawn a parable for those who have faith, the wife of Pharaoh, when she said, 'My Lord, build for me a home with you in paradise, and deliver me from Pharaoh and his conduct, and deliver me from the wrongdoing people.'" She did not just save Moses from death. She rejected Pharaoh's ideology, lived under his tyranny, yet defied him spiritually, and became a model of loyalty to God. This is Tabyeen, standing for truth while surrounded by falsehood. Next, let us look at Sayyedah Maryam, Saint Mary, silence, shame, and divine defense. Sayyedah Maryam's Tabyeen came through bearing the divine word. She was accused, shamed, and isolated, yet she never wavered. The Quran captures the moment she was confronted, And this is in Surah Al-Maryam, the chapter of Saint Mary, 19th chapter of the Quran, verses 27 to 28. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, she brought him, this is the baby, she brought him to her people carrying him. They said, O Maryam, you have certainly done a shocking thing. O sister of Harun, your father was not a wicked man, nor was your mother unchaste. And then the infant Jesus, Isa, spoke. And this is again from Surah Maryam, the chapter of Saint Mary, 19th chapter of the Quran, verses 30 to 31. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Jesus said as an infant, indeed, I am the servant of God. He has given me the book and made me a prophet. And he has made me blessed wherever I may be. And he has enjoined on me prayer and zakat or charity as long as I live, and to be good to my mother, and has not made me selfish and wretched. She did not respond to slander. Her silence was not weakness. It was a stage upon which divine truth would speak. This is Tabyeen, allowing the truth to unveil itself while the world rushes to judgment. Next, let us look at Sayyedah Hajar, the woman whose footsteps became ritual. Sayyedah Hajar, the mother of Prophet Ismail, was left in the desert, yet her running became revelation. Prophet Ibrahim, or Abraham, peace and blessings be upon him, prayed, and this is from Surah Ibrahim, the chapter of Prophet Ibrahim, 14th chapter of the Quran, verse number 37. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the prayer of Prophet Ibrahim. He says, O Lord, I have settled part of my descendants in a barren valley by your sacred house. O Lord, that they may maintain the prayer. So make the hearts of a part of the people fond of them and provide them with fruits so that they may give thanks. Her search for water became the sa'i, which is the running between the mounts of Safa and Marwa, which has been preserved in the Hajj. Her footsteps echo for eternity. Tabyeen is sometimes loud, and sometimes it is silent effort in the desert that God chooses to immortalize. Next, let us look at the women of allegiance, or bay'ah, political agents of the truth. In Quran, in Surah Al-Mumtahina, the chapter of the woman to be examined, 60th chapter of the Quran, verse number 12, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, O Prophet, when faithful women come to you to take the oath of allegiance to you, pledging that they shall not ascribe any partners to God, that they shall not steal, nor commit adultery, nor kill their children, nor utter any slander that may have been intentionally fabricated, nor disobey you in what is right, then accept their allegiance and plead for them to God for forgiveness. Indeed, God is all forgiving, all merciful. The women of Medina were not sidelined. They pledged, they promised truth. They entered into a contract with the Prophet and ultimately with God. Tabyeen includes the realm of bay'ah, or allegiance, politics, public allegiance, collective accountability. Next, let us look at Salama, the narrator of prophetic grief. When the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, informed Salama, who was one of his wives, of Imam Husayn's martyrdom, he gave her a flask of Karbala, of the soil of Karbala, saying it would turn to blood on that day, the day of Imam Husayn's martyrdom. In Nafs al-Mahmoum, Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi says, the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, said, this is soil that Gabriel brought me. I took it from the place where Hussein will be killed, and when he is martyred, it will turn to blood. Her preservation of this hadith is an act of tabyeen, protecting sacred memory against erasure. And now let us look at Sayyedah Zaynab, the living tafsir or exegesis of tabyeen. When Ibn Ziyad mocked her and asked, how did you find the way God treated your brother? She replied, I saw nothing but beauty. And again, all of the references can be found in the write-up. In the court of Yazid, she declared, by God, you will never erase our remembrance, nor will you ever cause our revelation to die. She is not an exception. She is the continuation of Quranic womanhood. Her Tabyeen was both an act of resistance and a revival of the Quran's truest spirit. The Quran does not restrict Tabyeen to men, nor does it confine revelation to prophets. The women of divine history stood with dignity, patience, and courage, and Sayyedah Zaynab stood in their footsteps, ahead of them, as the final voice of Karbala. Please give me a salawat, and we'll move to the idea of Sayyedah Zaynab and the weaponization of shame.
اللهم صل
اللهم صل
على
على
محمد
محمد وآل
وآل
محمد.
محمد.
She was shackled, but she was not silenced. In the aftermath of Karbala, Sayyedah Zaynab was spared by the sword, but she was targeted by something far more insidious, the weapon of humiliation. In the palace of Yazid, surrounded by the heads of martyrs and the laughter of courtiers, her captor did not merely aim to dominate her physically, he sought to crush her dignity. This tactic, stripping a woman of her sanctity and reducing her to a figure of shame, has long been the method of tyrants. The goal is not simply to imprison the body, but to make the soul question its worth, to silence truth by tarnishing honor. However, said Zaynab, she rose, in chains, surrounded by orphans, veils torn, and the grief immeasurable. She spoke not with vengeance, but with divine lucidity. Her pulpit was not of wood, it was her stance. Her sermon did not echo from marble halls, it thundered through time. Let's now look at Yazid's attempts at humiliation and her divine rebuttal. In Damascus, Yazid mocked the family of the Prophet and recited poetry linking his supposed victory to vengeance for Badr. When Sayyedah Zaynab was brought before him, he attempted to gloat over the martyrdom of her brother. She responded not as a grieving sister, but in fact as a hujjah, a proof of God against the tyrant. Her words, as recorded in al-Ihtijaj, carry the same tone as Quranic prophets before oppressors. She says, "So scheme your schemes, strive your utmost and exert your efforts. By God, you will never erase our remembrance, nor will you cause our revelation to die, nor reach our legacy, nor wash away your shame." This was Tabyeen in its purest form, speaking truth to power with fearless clarity. It echoed the Quranic imperative in Surah Al-An'am, the chapter of the cattle, 6th chapter of the Quran, verse 152. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And when you speak, speak with justice, even if it is against your own kin." And Surah Al-Ahzab, the chapter of the Confederates, 33rd chapter of the Quran, verse number 39. "Those who deliver the messages of God and fear Him, and fear none but God." Let us now look at shame as a tool of tyranny. The attempt to reduce a woman's power by attacking her dignity is not unique to Yazid. It is a tactic that has persisted across history. Imam Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, in his letter to Malik al-Ashtar warned, "Beware of rushing to defame people, for that is among the greatest forms of injustice." Shahid Mutahari explains in The Rights of Women in Islam that Islam was revolutionary in preserving the dignity of women in a society that used shame as a form of control. He says, "In the era of ignorance in Jahiliyyah, a woman was not only deprived of human rights, but her dignity and respect depended on her silence, on her seclusion, and her distance from society. Islam, by granting human rights to women, removed her from this condition and established her dignity and respect on the basis of faith, intellect, and human nobility." Let us now look at the Quranic principle that human dignity is inviolable. The Quran repeatedly insists that human dignity is not conditional, it is inherent. In Surah Al-Isra, the chapter of the night journey, 17th chapter of the Quran, verse number 70, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "Indeed, we have honored the children of Adam." Allama Tabatabai in Tafsir al-Mizan notes that this karama, this honor, is not just is not just the honor of creation. Rather, it's a responsibility to uphold the truth and resist degradation, even when someone is under oppression. And the Quran warns against shaming others. In Surah al-Hujurat, the chapter of the chambers, 49th chapter of the Quran, verse number 11, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who believe, let not some people ridicule others. They may be better than them. And Imam Khamenei, may Allah protect him, in his lectures on Islamic identity reminds us, a society in which women are honored based on piety, not appearance or silence, is a society that truly reflects Islam. Now let us look at modern parallels, gaslighting and emotional undermining. So the tactic used by Yazid is echoed, unfortunately, today. Women are made to feel too emotional, they're made to feel too emotional to teach or to lead. Wives are told obedience means silence, even when they witness wrongdoing. Activist women are shamed with labels, radical, immodest, disobedient, to keep them away from the front lines of moral discourse. But the Ahlul Bayt rejected such tactics. Imam Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, has said, the believer is more unyielding than the mountain. The mountain can be chipped away with picks, but nothing can chip away the faith of a believer. Sayyedah Zaynab is the proof of this hadith. A believer who could not be moved, even when shackled before the oppressor of her time. Now let us look at the idea of restoring the psychology of dignity. So, to follow Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, is not to simply weep for her. It is to learn from her refusal to be diminished. Communities must teach her story, not just during the nights of Ashura and Arbaeen, but in marriage courses, in youth halaqat or study circles, and indeed mental health circles. They must incorporate her sermon into Islamic leadership training, especially for women's programs, but also for men's programs. They must frame modesty as presence with dignity, not erasure or enforced silence. And they must recognize and confront spiritual and emotional abuse wherever it appears, including in religious spaces. Imam Khomeini, may God bless his pure soul, has taught us, when a child is in his mother's lap, he sees that his mother has good morals, correct actions, and pleasant speech. The child from that very place imitates the actions and words of the mother, which is the highest form of imitation, and is shaped by the mother's influence, which is the most effective of all influences. The happiness and misery of countries depends on the presence of women, and it is the women who, through her proper upbringing, creates human beings and leads the country and society toward reform. Imam Khamenei has also said something similar. He says, if a woman in a family, in a society, is properly educated, that family and that society will attain happiness. And once more, back to Imam Khomeini, who teaches us, and this is a very, very important quote, woman is the manifestation of the realization of human aspirations. Woman is the nurturer of noble men and women. From the lap of the woman, the man ascends to the heavens. The lap of the woman is the place where great women and great men are raised. It is a great day. A woman came into the world who stands against all men. A woman was born who is the exemplar of humanity. A woman was born in whom all human identity is manifest. So this is a great day. It is your day, women. And this was on the birth anniversary of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. And again, the citation, reference, everything are in the write-up. But that ascent is only possible when the woman is not made to feel ashamed for merely existing. Sayyidah Zaynab's chains were not her weakness. They were her pulpit, her mimbar. Her sermon was not a response. It was the continuation of Ashura. She did not defend herself. She defended the truth, and in doing so, she taught every generation that true shame is not in being oppressed. It is in remaining silent when truth is trampled upon. Let us never weaponize shame. Let us raise Zaynabi daughters and Husayni sons who honor them. Please give me a salawat, and we move to the subject of the injustice of silencing from Fadak to Damascus.
اللهم صل على محمد
محمد
وآل
وآل
محمد.
محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So the legacy of Tabyeen through speech did not begin with Sayyed Zaynab. It was inherited. Decades before the plains of Karbala, Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra, peace and blessings be upon her, stood in the Prophet's mosque, delivering a sermon that remains among the most theologically and politically forceful discourses in human history. This is known as the Khutbah al-Fadakiyyah. Her sermon, which opens with detailed Quranic praise and affirmation of divine justice, included this command from the Book of God. This is from Surah An-Nisa, the chapter of the women, 4th chapter of the Quran, verse 135, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who believe, O you who have faith, be maintainers of justice and witnesses for God, even if it be against yourselves. She did not speak emotionally. She spoke exegetically, correcting a misreading of divine inheritance law and the right of Wilayah. As Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, may God rest his pure soul, stated in a lecture commemorating Sayyid Zaynab, Sayyid Zaynab did not speak after Imam Hussein. She became Imam Hussein. His blood flowed on her tongue as it flowed on his body. The sermon of Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra became the sermon of Sayyid Zaynab. This is Sayyid Hassan saying this. Let us now look at the idea of silencing in the name of modesty, a corruption of the prophetic model. So, across generations, women's public voices have been restricted, not through textual prohibition, but rather through cultural manipulation. The guise of modesty has often been used to block even the most Quranic and scholarly voices. Imam Ali states in Nahj al-Balagha, people are of two types, a righteous, God-conscious one who is noble before God, and a wicked, miserable one who is insignificant before God. No distinction is made by gender. Honor is through taqwa, as the Quran declares in Surah Hujurat, the chapter of the chambers, 49th chapter of the Quran, verse number 13. Indeed, the most honored of you in God's sight is the most God-conscious amongst you. And the martyred Ayatollah Beheshti, he wrote, Islam did not command women to be silent. Rather, it invited both men and women to responsibility. Let us now look at speech as a religious duty, not a gendered privilege. The Quran commands speech as a means of justice, not gender. One of the most powerful verses on da'wah, inviting to Islam, evangelizing, reads, and this is from Surah al-Fussilat, the chapter of the explaining in detail, 41st chapter of the Quran, verse number 33. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and who speaks better than one who invites to God, does righteous deeds, and says, I am of the Muslims, or I am of the ones who submit. In Tafsir al-Mizan, Allama Tabatabai, he writes, this verse proves that the best speech is that which invites to God, paired with righteous action and identity within Islam. And it includes all believing men and women. Shaykh Murtada Mutahhari, may God rest his pure soul, confirms this principle in the rights of women in Islam. He says, Islam does not accept a woman's silence in the face of injustice under the name of modesty. What is sacred is truth, not silence before falsehood. Let us now look at Sayyid Zaynab's sermon as divine fulfillment. When Sayyid Zaynab stood before Yazid, she embodied the Quranic imperative. And this is from Surah Al-Ahzab, the chapter of the Confederates, 33rd chapter of the Quran, verse number 70, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, O you who believe, be conscious of God and speak a word that is just. Imam Khamenei in his speech has said, the sermon of Sayyid Zaynab in Yazid's court was not a sword, It was a verse that exposed the tyrant. Now, let us look at why silencing women is bid'ah. It's an innovation and it is not Islam. The Prophet himself condemned the hiding of truth. He said, and this is from Al-Kafi, he said, when innovations appear in my ummah, the scholar must reveal his knowledge. Whoever does not, upon him is the curse of God. This includes female scholars and truth speakers, as Ayatollah Sayyidina Hussein Fadlallah has said, or rather has written. He says, the woman is not expected to be silent when Islam is violated. She must cry out for truth, in the same way as Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra and Sayyedah Zaynab did. Let us now look at why Zaynabi platforms must be created. So, if we honor Sayyedah Zaynab, we must build the platforms she never had. Hawza and seminaries must train female preachers and scholars with theological rigor. Khutbas, sermons, halaqat, study circles, and majalis, sittings, should include the voices of righteous women. And cultural constructs that equate female presence with impropriety must be confronted. The martyr, Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, speaking to women in Lebanon shortly before his martyrdom, declared, the woman who rejects humiliation and declares her stance is the witness to the continuity of Husseini blood. If she does not speak, Hussein will die again. Please give me a salawat and we move to Risalat al-Huquq and the marriage of light.
اللهم صل على
So let us now look at marriage as a moral trust, not a power hierarchy. In the teachings of Islam, marriage is not a transactional contract or a platform for control. Rather, it is a spiritual partnership rooted in mutual rights, in love and accountability. No text captures this better than Risalat al-Huquq of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, peace and blessings be upon him, where the Imam lists over 50 reciprocal rights between the individual, society, and God. Among them is the right of the wife, haqq az-zawja, which he describes in the following words. He says, as for the right of your wife, you should know that God has made her a tranquility and comfort for you. She is a blessing from God, therefore honor her and treat her with gentleness. Even though your right over her is greater, she still has a right that you should show her mercy. For she is your captive. Feed her and clothe her, and if she is ignorant at times, forgive her. This profound formulation annihilates any reading of Islam that treats marriage as a hierarchy of superiority. The wife is not a servant. She is a trust from God. Her mistakes are not occasions for domination. They are moments that demand forgiveness, mercy, and compassion. Let us now look at the Quranic vision, love and mercy, not control. Now, the foundation of this ethic is in the Quran itself. In the Quran, in Surah Al-Rum, the chapter of the Romans, 30th chapter of the Quran, verse number 21, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, and amongst his signs is that he created for you mates from amongst yourselves, so that you may find tranquility in them, and he placed between you affection and mercy. In Tafsir al-Mizan, Allama Tabatabai, may God rest his soul, writes, tranquility only exists where there is security. Affection and mercy are the psychological foundations of married life, not dominance or coercion. Let us now look at the idea of revisiting qiwama or protection, accountability, not superiority. So the oft misunderstood verse, which is Surah An-Nisa, the chapter of the women, 4th chapter of the Quran, verse number 34, which says, men are the maintainers, qawamun, of women. This verse has been weaponized in patriarchal cultures to imply male superiority. But the Quranic term qawwama comes from qiyam, to stand with, to support, to protect, not to dominate. Imam Khomeini, Qudus Sirruh Sharif, may God rest his pure soul, he explains, Qawama means responsibility, not superiority. The man is accountable, not a master. And this is from his Tahrir al-Wasila. And again, all of the references and citations are in the write-up. I strongly recommend people take a look at it. And Ayatollah Shaheed Dr. Beheshti adds, in Islam, the man is qawwam not because he is superior, but because greater responsibility is placed upon him. Let us now look at a very interesting subject, the problem of polygamy, legal but often abused. Islam permits polygamy under strict ethical and social responsibility. Polygamy, of course, being a man having more than one wife. Yet in many communities, it is abused by those who use the letter of the law to satisfy their ego, rather than to serve justice. The Quran warns. Surah An-Nisa, the chapter of the women, 4th chapter of the Quran, verse number 3. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but if you fear you will not deal justly, then marry only one. Ayatollah Mutahhari strongly condemned the misuse of polygamy. He says, polygamy, when it crosses the boundaries of justice, becomes injustice, not just to the woman, but in fact to Islam itself. Even the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, despite it being lawful, only married monogamously with said Khadija, the woman who bore the weight of his mission. Let us now look at the idea of rebuilding marriage on the basis of Wilayah. To rebuild the sanctity of marriage, we must return to Risalat al-Huquq and the Quran. The path forward requires, number one, premarital education grounded in Islamic ethics and emotional intelligence, condemning the cultural distortion of qawwama into authoritarianism, teaching men that honoring one's wife is part of religious piety and God awareness, and reframing discussions of polygamy from legal entitlement to a moral burden. As said Hassan Nasrallah, may God rest his pure soul, beautifully summarized. In Islam, the woman is the partner of the man, not his subordinate. She, just as Sayyedah Zaynab was the partner in Imam Husayn's blood, the woman must be a partner in responsibility. Now, please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the subject of women as protectors of Wilayah.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وصل على محمد وآل محمد.
So, Wilayah is not sustained by swords alone. The concept of Wilayah, divine authority and guardianship, lies at the heart of Islam. But this sacred trust did not survive through men alone. Women were the pillars of its preservation, often when men faltered, and always when truth was endangered. The Quran honors the first believers not by gender, but by conviction. In Surah Tawbah, the chapter of repentance, 9th chapter of the Quran, verse 100, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, and the foremost, the first among the immigrants and the helpers and those who follow them in excellence. God is pleased with them and they are pleased with him. Among these sabiqun, the foremost, was Sayyedah Khadija, peace and blessings be upon her, the first to believe in the Prophet, the financier of the Islamic mission, and the woman whose home housed the roots of Wilayah. Let us now talk a little about Sayyedah Khadija, the first to guard the flame. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, has said, the best of the women of her time was Khadija bint Khuwaylid. And when she died, Gabriel descended and conveyed God's greetings to her. And this is narrated in both Sunni and Shia sources. We'll look at the Sunni source first. In al-Bukhari, it says, convey to her the peace of her Lord and my own peace. This is Jibreel speaking to Prophet Muhammad. Convey to her the peace of her Lord and my own peace, and give her glad tidings of a home in paradise. And from Shia sources, this is from Bihar al-Anwar, it says, Gabriel came to the Prophet and said, O Muhammad, convey to Khadija the greetings of peace from her Lord. Imam Khomeini, may God bless his pure soul, wrote of her, Islam is indebted to Khadija. Without her financial and emotional support, the prophetic mission would have been strangled at birth. Next, let us look at Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra, the voice of post-prophetic Wilayah. After the Prophet's passing, when confusion spread and truth was buried beneath politics, it was Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra who rose to defend the Wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali. Her khutbah al-Fadakiyyah is not just a grievance over land. It is a constitutional sermon affirming the Quranic basis for imamah, succession, and resistance against tyranny. She said, they broke the covenants of Wilayah, exposed its secrets, and denied its blessings. And this is from Khutbah al-Fadakiyyah. And in fact, the entire text of the khutbah is in the write-up. It's too long to mention over here, but the entire text in Arabic and English is available in the write-up. I recommend everyone take a look at it. Ayatollah Sayyid Hussain Fadlallah, may God rest his pure soul, says, Sayyedah Fatima's sermon was a cry of imamah. It stirred history in defense of Wilayah, just as Ashura stirred the hearts. Next, let us look at Sayyedah Zaynab, the one who preserved Karbala. If Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra guided Wilayah through speech, Sayyedah Zaynab preserved it through endurance. Imam Zayn al-Abidin, peace and blessings be upon him, said of her, you are, by God's grace, a woman of knowledge without being taught, and of understanding without being instructed. And Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, may God rest his pure soul, called her the narrator of Karbala and the bearer of Imam Hussein's standard to the Ummah. Without Sayyedah Zaynab, Ashura would have been blood without meaning. Let us now look at Surah Al-Kawthar, abundance through a woman. Those who mocked the Prophet for having no male progeny were rebuked in the Quran. In Surah Al-Kawthar, the chapter of abundance, the 108th chapter of the Quran, verses 1 to 3. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, indeed, we have given you abundance. So pray to your Lord and sacrifice. Indeed, your enemy is the one cut off. Allama Tabatabai in Al-Mizan interprets Al-Kawthar as, it is great abundance, and its greatest manifestation is Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra and her pure progeny. Through Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra, the line of Imamah continued, and through Sayyedah Zaynab, its message was preserved. Let us now look at teaching the uswa, or the example, of the women of Wilayah. Communities should revive their madrasa or religious school curricula to center the roles of Sayyedah Khadija, Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra, Sayyedah Zaynab, not just as family members, but as leaders of resistance. They should also highlight their theological significance in Islamic studies, not only emotional value in mourning rituals. They should teach Surah Al-Kawthar, not as a rebuttal to polytheists, but as a Quranic validation of feminine Wilayah. And they should empower young women to see themselves as successors of this path, not just mourners of its history. Imam Khamenei has said, the woman in Islam is a carrier of the message, the inheritor of Wilayah, and a speaker of truth. This is not an exception, it is the origin. Please give me a salawat and we'll look at women in the modern era of Tabyeen.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل.
In every era of Islamic struggle, women have stepped forward, not merely as supporters of resistance, but as frontline participants, thinkers, teachers, and martyrs. Sayyedah Zaynab shattered the illusion that modesty means silence or that faith is passive. Her sermon in Yazid's court, unveiled, unflinching, and unmatched, has echoed across centuries. Its spirit can be heard in the defiant voices of women in Iraq, Iran, Egypt, Palestine, and beyond. The Quran says in Surah Al-Ahzab, the chapter of the Confederates, 33rd chapter of the Quran, verse 39, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, they are those who convey the messages of God, fear Him and fear none but God. Such are the Zaynabis of our time. And let's look at a few of them. First of all, let's look at Sayyedah Amina bint al-Huda, the martyr of the pen. She was the sister of Ayatollah Shaheed, Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, and a scholar in her own right. Sayyedah Amina bint al-Huda revolutionized Islamic education for girls in Iraq. She established schools, edited religious journals, and used fiction to teach Islamic values. In a lecture, she once said, "A woman's pen can be a warrior, just like the bullets of the Mujahideen." She was arrested, tortured, and martyred by the Saddam regime in April of 1980, just days before her brother. Imam Khamenei, may Allah protect him, praised her, saying, Shahida Sayyedah Amina bint al-Huda was a banner of Tabyeen in the arena of women. Next, let us look at Marzieh Haddadshi, or Dabbaga as she's sometimes called, the commander of the revolution. Once tortured by the Shah's Savak, his secret police that was trained and funded by the CIA and Mossad, Marzieh Haddadshi became a leading commander in the armed resistance and a representative of Imam Khomeini during his exile. She later served as a member of parliament and remained a fierce defender of the Islamic system. Imam Khomeini has said, "Some women stood against the tyrant with more nobility than many men." Let us now look at Zaynab al-Ghazali, a voice for Islam in Egypt. Though Sunni, Zaynab al-Ghazali was a powerful Quranic teacher, an activist who challenged secularism and gendered oppression in Egypt. She was imprisoned and tortured by the Jamal Abdel Nasser regime in the 1960s for her religious activism. In her memoirs, which are titled Days from My Life, Ayyam min Hayati, she writes, "In the woman's prison, I saw a miniature image of the prison of Sayyid Zaynab bint Ali." Next, let us look at Razan al-Najjar, the martyr in the white coat. A 21-year-old Palestinian medic from Gaza, Razan al-Najjar was shot by Zionist snipers while treating wounded protesters during the Great March of Return in 2018. She became a global icon of sacrifice, dignity, and humanitarian resistance. The Quran says, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, the chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Quran, verse number 32, "And whoever saves one life, it is as if he had saved all of humanity." Her mother, upon her martyrdom, said, and this was in an interview given to Al Jazeera, she went to save lives and returned as a pure martyr. Next, let us look at Shireen Abu Akleh, silenced for bearing witness. A Christian Palestinian journalist, Shireen Abu Akleh, was shot dead while reporting on Israeli raids in the West Bank in 2022. She is revered by Muslims and Christians alike. She exposed injustice until her last breath. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, may God bless his pure soul, said, "She is a martyr of the word, a martyr of the truth, a martyr of the stance, a martyr of the field. She was the voice of truth in the face of tyranny and occupation." Next, let us look at Serena Shim, the whistleblower of the Ummah. Serena Shim, a Lebanese-American journalist who uncovered the role of Turkish intelligence in aiding Daesh or ISIS. Days later, she was killed in a very suspicious car crash in Turkey in 2014. Despite threats to her life, she refused to remain silent. In her final interview on Press TV, she said, "I'm a bit afraid, but I have nothing to hide, and I will continue doing my job." Her family and many observers believe she was martyred for exposing the truth. Now, let us look at making the Zaynabi legacy a living curriculum. First of all, communities and believers should include these figures in Islamic history courses, not as political footnotes, but as spiritual exemplars of Tabyeen. They should encourage youth projects and storytelling that revive these names and others, their struggles and their words. And they should create platforms for female scholars, for journalists, for artists and educators to operate in light of Sayyedah Zaynab's legacy with dignity, courage, and clarity. Imam Khamenei reminds us, if Sayyedah Zaynab bint Ali could deliver a sermon in the Umayyad court, no one may say that women are unfit for this role. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the idea of same is not equal, unmasking the myths of misogyny and modernity.
اللهم صل
اللهم
على
صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Today's youth are surrounded by conflicting paradigms. Patriarchy tells women, stay silent, you are deficient. And Western feminism tells women, imitate men, your femininity is a flaw. Both ignore the Quranic principle that difference does not mean inequality. In Quran, in Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, third chapter of the Quran, verse number 36, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, the male is not like the female. This is not a statement of superiority, but rather of distinction. In the eyes of God, spiritual worth is not based on gender. In Quran, Surah Al-Ahzab, chapter of the Confederates, 33rd chapter of the Quran, verse 35, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, surely the Muslim men and the Muslim women, the patient men and the patient women, God has prepared for them forgiveness and a great reward. Let us look at, in a bit more detail at the misinterpretation of Qawamun, protectors. As we've said previously, one of the most misused verses in gender discourse is men are the protectors or Qawamun over women. This is from Surah An-Nisa, chapter of the women, 4th chapter of the Quran, verse number 34. The word Qawam does not mean superiority. Allama Tabatabai in Al-Mizan explains, what is meant by Qawama is the care and management of a woman's affairs in both worldly and religious terms, not dominance or tyranny. The verse places greater responsibility on men, not greater honor. Let's now look at Shaykh Mutahhari, Feminine Identity is Not Inferior. In his seminal work, The Rights of Women in Islam, Ayatollah Shaheed Murtada Mutahhari, he writes, if woman excels man in beauty and delicacy, he excels her in strength and firmness. Each completes the other. He rebuked Western feminists for demanding women act like men, thereby destroying the sanctity of womanhood. The Islamic system does not want women to become men, he says. He wants them to remain women and to excel as women. Imam Khomeini, he talks about elevation through obedience to God, not fashion. Imam Khomeini warned against materialist and colonialist ideologies targeting women. He said, they want to remove women from her sacred status, to make her a tool in the hands of colonialism. He called for the revival of Fatimiyya-style dignity. He said, the woman presented in Islam is Sayyedah Fatimah al-Zahra, not the woman who appears in the streets or on television screens. And Imam Khamenei, he teaches that balance is the key. In multiple addresses, Imam Khamenei has reiterated, and again, the references for where these addresses are from are all in the write-up. So Imam Khamenei has said, Islam did not wrong women, and women are not wronged in Islam. The one truly wronged is the woman who does not realize her own nobility. He emphasized that true empowerment lies in knowing one's fitrah or innate nature. He says, justice requires that we grant woman her true status and human dignity, not that we make her into a copy of a man or force her to resemble a man. Let us now look at patriarchy and feminism as two sides of the same coin. So patriarchy restricts women in the name of honor, and feminism distorts women in the name of freedom. Both erase the fitrah, the divinely embedded nature of human beings. The late Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi Bayazdi, may God bless his pure soul, notes, a woman's perfection is not in resembling a man, but in attaining her own distinct perfections. Let us look at a theology of gender rooted in revelation. Communities should include tafsir classes that unpack various verses such as Surah An-Nisa, verse 34, Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 35, Surah Al-Imran, verse 36, verses we've mentioned, with commentary from places like Al-Mizan, from Tafsir Namuna, and from the contemporary scholars. Communities should also promote the reading of material from Ayatollah Mutahhari, from Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, and Ayatollah Mizbayazdi, and Ayatollah Beheshti, amongst others, in premarital education and youth seminars. And they must train scholars and public speakers to engage gender issues with theological depth, not just reactive slogans. Let us reclaim this narrative, not by replicating the West, not by defending cultural patriarchy, but by clarifying what God has already clarified. Please give me a loud salawat, and we move on to the subject of if the mothers are broken, the collapse of the ummah begins at home.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So the womb as a divine trust. The Quran honors the maternal role as sacred, referring to the womb as a site of divine creation. In Surah Al-Mu'minun, the chapter of the believers, 23rd chapter of the Quran, verses 12 to 14, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, certainly we created humans from an extract of clay. Then we made him a drop of seminal fluid lodged in a secure abode. Then we created the drop of fluid as a clinging mass. Then we created the clinging mass as fleshy tissue. Then we created the fleshy tissue as bones. Then we clothed the bones with flesh. Then we produced him as yet another creature. So blessed is God, the best of creators. The womb, or rahim, so sanctified that God derives his name Ar-Rahman from it. The womb, and this is from Al-Kulayni, there is a hadith, the womb, or in Arabic it's called Ar-Rahim, is derived from Ar-Rahman. Let us look at the collapse begins at home. When the status of motherhood is diminished, the foundation of future generations is shaken. Imam Ali has said, the child is the fruit of the heart. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, famously stated, paradise lies at the feet of mothers. This is not mere sentiment. Rather, it is theology. When the mother is broken, the child lacks emotional grounding, the family loses its center of mercy, and the ummah produces individuals untethered from love, prayer, and meaning. Let us look at the Quranic promise to the righteous, regardless of gender. Islamic value is based on piety, not upon gender. In Surah An-Nahl, the chapter of the bee, 16th chapter of the Quran, verse 97, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, whoever does righteous deeds, male or female, while having faith, we will surely grant them a goodly life. Let us look at Sayyedah Fatimah al-Zahra, the mother of the Ummah. Now, she was not only the mother of Imam Husayn, Sayyedah Zaynab, but in fact, she is the mother of the entire Ummah. Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, has said, Sayyedah Fatimah al-Zahra is the perfect manifestation of humanity and the example of the complete woman in the world. She is the model mother, the model mourner, the model mujahida, whose home became the nucleus of divine leadership. Ayatollah Beheshti says motherhood is not subordination, it is sovereignty. He says, woman is a human, and a great one at that. Woman is the nurturer of society. From her lap, humanity ascends to the heavens. And Imam Khamenei says, the mother shapes the future. He says, raising children is a responsibility placed upon the mother, and if fulfilled rightly, will yield a noble and God-fearing society. Let us now look at the revival of reverence. Educate the ummah, educate the communities on Quranic verses and hadith regarding motherhood. Not just on Mother's Day, but in sermons or khutbah, in schools and in the media. There should be the launching of community campaigns like Fatimiyya, honoring the sacred womb, engaging scholars, poets, and families. There should be a reframing of family discourse, balanced between the roles of the father and the mother, rooted in Risat al-Huquq and Quranic ethics, as well as the teachings of the senior scholars. And there should be training for men to honor the mothers of their children, for their silence and patience are not weakness, but rather are jihad. This should be a year-round honoring, not one-day tokenism. In a world that reduces the honor of women to a single calendar date, with slogans on Mother's Day or Woman's Day, Islam offers something deeper, a lifelong reverence rooted in divine instruction. Rather than a single day of praise, followed by a year of neglect, the followers of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, peace and blessings be upon her, must build a culture where every day is a day of Fatimiyya, a day to recognize the moral, emotional, and spiritual foundation that women lay within the family and the ummah. And this is especially true during the Ayyam Fatimiyya, the days of mourning for Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, when her light, silence, and stand for truth should reawaken in every heart a sense of duty towards those who carry the trust of life itself. Let Fatimiyya become the new Woman's Day, not as a replacement for societal activism, but as its sanctified anchor, rooting resistance in the womb that nurtured prophets, the Imams, the martyrs, and the righteous. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the conclusion.
اللهم صل على محمد.
So, in every age, the martyr is mourned, but it is the witness who is forgotten. The sword of Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, stunned the world, but it was the voice of Sayyedah Zaynab that interpreted the meaning of that sword. It is here that the work of Tabyeen or clarification reaches its most demanding form. Not just to resist with our bodies, but to clarify with our words. Not just to weep, but to stand. Not just to inherit sorrow, but to carry the trust of truth. Sayyidah Zaynab was not a spectator of history. She was not a woman who merely endured. She rose, she clarified, and she thundered. From Kufa to Damascus, she stood taller than palaces and empires. And today, we are faced with a choice: to admire her from a distance or to walk in her footsteps. And as she said, so plot your schemes and exert your efforts and strive with all of your power. As she said to Yazid, by God, you will never erase our remembrance, nor extinguish our revelation, nor reach our end, nor wash away your shame. And let us look at the Quranic mandate to clarify. The Quran commands, and this is from Surah Al-Furqan, chapter of the Criterion, 25th chapter of the Quran, verse 52. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, and strive against them with it, yani with the Quran, a mighty striving. This jihad, this mighty striving is the jihad of clarification or tabyeen, of truth spoken without distortion, without fear, without compromise. It is the jihad of Sayyidah Zaynab. And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, has said, when innovations or bid'ah appear and the scholar remains silent about them, let him prepare his seat in the fire. And this is a legacy carried by everyone. The mission of Sayyidah Zaynab was not limited to women. It is a legacy for every believer who seeks to clarify, to defend, and stand. In Al-Kafi, we have a hadith which says, be callers to our cause without using your tongue, this is from Imam al-Sadiq, but through your actions, and be an adornment for us, not a disgrace. A man who protects rather than controls. A youth who questions with reverence. And a mother who weaves faith dua, and dignity into every word, and raises her child firm upon the truth. A student who challenges distortion. Each and every one of these is Zaynabi. From Sayyedah Zaynab from Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra to Sayyedah Zaynab, until Imam al-Hujjah, Jalla Ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif, may God hasten his return, may our souls be his ransom. Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra stood alone in Medina. Sayyedah Zaynab rose in chains in Damascus. And now we await the final witness, the Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom, and may God hasten his return. He carries their light. When he returns, he will not ask who mourned Sayyedah Zaynab. He will ask who continued her work. Will we be among those who were ready? Like we say in Dua Ahad, "Oh God, make me amongst his supporters, his aides, and those who defend him." Are we going to be like that? Let us now look ahead. The ink, the poem, and the witness. Our journey continues. If Sayyedah Zaynab preserved the message with her words, then who preserves it now? In the next and final part of this series, we will explore the agents of transmission, the writers who carry the truth with the pen, the poets who encode resistance in rhythm, and the witnesses who keep the fire alive through remembrance and tears. And we will ask, are we worthy of being their heirs? Now, please give me a loud salawat, and we move to the supplication eulogy, which this evening is entitled, Sayyedah Zaynab is our witness.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرج.
In your name, O God, the one who counts every footstep made in yearning, and every tear shed in longing, you who heard the cry in Karbala, and you who now hear the silence in Gaza. O Lord of the shrine, O witness of the oppressed, we walk, but we ask you, do we walk like Sayyedah Zaynab walked? Do we rise like she rose? Do we weep only for her chains? Or do we weep that we still refuse to carry her burden? O Sayyedah Zaynab, daughter of the Lion of God, voice of Wilayah, witness of Husayn's blood, you saw your sons martyred, you saw your veil torn, you stood in the court of the tyrant and said, I saw nothing but beauty. You whose feet were shackled, yet whose voice shook empires, you who were robbed of sanctity, yet preserved the sanctity of Husayn, you are our witness. O Sayyedah Zaynab, we walk towards Karbala, but do we walk away from injustice? We mourn the tents that burned, yet ignore the homes ablaze in Rafah. We cry for Ali al-Asghar, but remain silent as the children of Gaza are choked not by arrows, but by imposed famine. O Sayyedah Zaynab, we wear black for your grief, but our hearts are whitewashed with indifference. We raise slogans of love, but fail to stand for the truth. You are our witness. O God, we walk to Karbala, but do we walk away from sin, from arrogance, from injustice, from the neglect of the oppressed, from the comfort that makes cowards of us all? O Lord of the martyrs, forgive us, for we weep at the shrine, but remain mute before the cries of the unborn, whose lives are discarded in the name of choice. We whisper prayers, yet leave our elders forgotten, until cold systems offer the easier exit, and we call it mercy. O God, you gave us Sayyedah Fatima al-Zahra, and we did not defend her legacy. You gave us Sayyedah Zaynab, and we used her name but not her voice. You gave us mothers, and we let them be dishonored, traded for convenience and culture. We walk now, not in triumph but in repentance. We walk not for reward, but for redemption. O Imam al-Mahdi, O son of Imam Husayn, O eye of the oppressed, O awaited one in Gaza and in Karbala, O hidden Zaynabi in the cloak of ghaiba or occultation, we walk to your grandfather's grave, but we carry your mission in our hands. Accept this walk as a pledge that we will rise as Husayni, speak as Zaynabi, and serve as Mahdawi. O Master, forgive us for delaying your return with our cowardice and compromise. Forgive us for watching injustice from screens while you weep in the night for your followers who sleep through their duties. You are our Imam, and Sayyedah Zaynab is our witness. O God, make this walk our migration to truth. Let every blister erase a sin. Let every tear wash away our heedlessness. Let every dua open the road to action. Make us Zaynabi, not just in grief, but in grit. Make us Mahdawi, not just in words, but in will. Make us Husayni, not just in mourning, but in movement. For if we return from Karbala unchanged, then did we ever really arrive? O God, make us amongst his helpers, his aides, his defenders, those who hasten to fulfill his needs, those who obey his commands, those who protect him, those who precede others in seeking his pleasure, and those who attain martyrdom before him. Sayyedah Zaynab is our witness. Let us not be her shame. Let us be her answer. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. وآخر الدعوان عن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.